Welcome back to Reynolds Runabouts, everybody. I'm Jeffrey Reynolds, and today we are starting the restoration of this 1959 to 1961 Lake and Sea 14-foot Caribbean model. Now, the reason there's a date span there is because between 1959 and 1961, these boats were made by two companies. Parsons Corporation of Traverse City, Michigan started building this model in late 1958 for the 59 model year. They also made them in 1960. About March of 1960, they let a subcontract to Michigan Fiberglass in Holland, Michigan to also make two models, the 16-foot Arrowhead and the 14-foot Biscayne. So at one time, both companies were making the same two models in two different locations in Michigan. Under the 1960 contract, Michigan Fiberglass didn't have their name on this boat. In 1961, we started seeing Michigan Fiberglass boats that were technically Lake and Seas being made. And that's because Parsons allowed them to use the molds and release the rights to manufacture them under Michigan Fiberglass's name. If you're lucky, you'll find a Michigan Fiberglass nameplate in your boat or a Parsons Corporation nameplate, meaning the manufacturer's plate, on the inside cockpit, typically to the left on the inside wall on the port side. This one has neither. So we have a 1959 to 1961 Lake and Sea 14-foot Caribbean. Well, we don't know which manufacturer it is. And to be honest, it would be pretty hard to know that. One thing that leads me to believe that it's a 1960 or a 61 is the Wilcox Crittenden hardware, which in all of my studies of the many Lake and Seas that I've looked at and owners have showed me images of, the Wilcox Crittenden hardware started showing up in 1960 and in 61. They were seen as well on both the Parsons and the Michigan Fiberglass models. Some of these other elements are completely different and not original. Is this step plate up here on the bow? Really cool. I think it's a Wilcox Crittenden. Don't know. Never seen it. I'll ask the owner if he wants me to put it back, but it would not be original. So you got the rope skein or the rope guide, some people call them. This is the cleat. Here we have an Atwood bow light, which is very normal to find on the Lake and Seas. Some have the handle, some don't. Most of them don't. I look at the windshield, typical Taylor windshield. This is it's seen on very few late 1950s, early 60s boats. This is an aluminum um, windshield corner. You polish that. And then some of the other hardware is also, this is Atwood. It's your step plate. Steering wheel is very different. Not even sure what that is. And then I come back and I look at some of the other pieces, like here. We see the Atwood stern light, very normal. The vents are not standard, but I see a lot of them on Lake and Sea boats because there was no ventilation back here. It was all enclosed. Once those rear seats are folded back and into place, there's no ventilation. So very common to see that. Atwood tow eyes down on the stern, and that's about it. What I'm going to do today is take this boat apart. And to do that, you need to take this decorative rail off. This is aluminum, has aluminum screws fastened with ferrous metal washers and nuts, which don't have a happy ending. And this one they'll snap, and we'll have to go ahead and just, when the heads pop off, you should have a release anyway. So in looking closer, I don't know why I didn't do this sooner, but this is one of the clues that you can use to date your boat. This has the Lake and Sea logos, which all of them have, even when the Michigan Fiberglass did them. The difference is the 1959 to 1960 models will have Parsons Corporation here in the badge. What happened with Michigan Fiberglass is they didn't have Michigan Fiberglass Company. They just took a router and routed out the Parsons Corporation name. That's how you can tell. In addition to, if you're lucky, you have a manufacturer's plate on the inside front cockpit, port side. Normally, if there's a right-hand steering wheel, you'll see them there. This one does not, it's gone. But with the Traverse City logo, this means it's at least a 1959 or 1960. And this will be very hard to restore. I have original new old stock of these, and I have replicas that we can probably use and have a lot more. It'll look better for the chromer to work on that. So I'm going to get going on getting all of these aluminum screws and ferrous nuts and washers off here. And then once we pop this decorative trim off, we'll be able to attack the industrial staples that are underneath. So each one of these is a little bit different. Up here I had slot heads. Down here I have the Phillips, which is what I've noticed on other Lake and Seas, more common. So I go to push this, I pull this, and it just snaps the head right off. The aluminum is so soft, it just pops it right off. Eventually I'll just be able to pop that trim off because I know this bolt or this nut is now gone. Some of them are completely gone. They have just rusted away. So I'm going to go ahead and put a Phillips on the rest of these and bag everything to make sure I have the accurate measurements and stuff. And it's good to keep some original pieces. And then when I order new stainless, I'll get the Phillips, which is correct in the right count. I'll have all that ready to go. So I'm going to get back to work getting this rail off. So as I'm working my way down the starboard rail, the original Phillips head screws that are in here have a slight blue tinge, which means they're bronze at best, but they're so soft that I'm pretty sure it's brass. So makes sense. Both in sea salty conditions, like this boat came from Virginia, and as in the name Lake and Sea, bronze and brass were used in boat building forever because they last longer against the elements, especially salt. That's the early outboards used bronze and bronze shafts in the lower below the waterline because they didn't corrode like aluminum did. So the unfortunate thing about brass, it's soft. You can't take it out with a driver. Some came out, very few. But the other great thing about brass is that you can drill it out. So you just get the appropriate bit that fits that hole, and you just slowly. Remember, with metal, slow on the drill bit, wood is fast. So you just get in there, and what will happen, it'll eventually become almost like a screw remover. Get a little more pressure on this. It'll dig in there. Let's see if I can back it out. No. You could use it, unscrew them as well, because it is so soft. If anything, you've gotten through the screw, and it'll just be a hole there. But the goal is to get the whole screw out of there. My bit would hold on. There we go. So one of the scenarios is you take it all out. The brass is now gone. There'll be a little head here that I'll take off, probably with my, let's try a putty knife, because that's just probably just a corroded head. Yeah, it's kind of sitting there, but what I'll do when I countersink this, because I need to save these decorative rails. These are not made anymore. They were made probably very few years or made custom for Lake and Sea. So it's important that you try to keep these rails unless they're really beat up. So what I'm going to be doing is a lot of sanding eventually, but it's aluminum, which makes it a whole lot easier to fix than maybe stainless. So I'll just address that some other time when I'm working on the rail. But for now, I've got to finish the rest of these off with a drill bit because I can't get them out with a screw and I can't pound them out. So off I go. Now that I've got these fasteners all out, pull the trim off, and there are still some heads of the brass that I'll have to take out. Just my pliers. Pull those out. I didn't bore the holes out too bad where I had to drill. So happy with that because this is very soft. Aluminum is in good shape on the bottom. It's oxidized like it's supposed to. Try to keep the shape. It's very pliable, so when you go to put it back on at the end of the process, it's very pliable and you can get it to form anywhere you want. Now I'm into, got to do the front yet, but here is where the staples go in. Since an industrial stapler was used, when I looked at the records of Parsons Corporation, which I have a complete digitized copy of from Virginia Tech University, has John Parsons collection. It tells you exactly what brand of staple they used and the stapler, which are still very expensive to buy. I do not know what I will do. I might get some industrial staples and then hammer them through and then just round them over like like you would do with a clinch nail on a clinch nail boat. It would be that way. It would be look original and be done the way it was done then. And I would have seam compound in here, obviously, for leaking. Just for a historical side note, in 1957, Chris Kraft bought the Lake and Sea Corporation out of Boca Raton, Florida, and owned it for about 6 months. And in that time, the brand got the name Leak and Sink. And that's for one reason that I can tell just from the records, is that Parsons had the same problem. Back here, where the trim package and the whole deck seam is below the water line or very close to it. And that, from what Parsons Corporation, its warranty claims in 1959 there wasn't enough seam compound or the right kind at this level where the water would get in and then it would leak. Sink probably is more over dramatic of what really happened, but they did have leaking back here as well with Parsons, and most likely it was the same joint issue that they had with Chris Kraft. Chris Kraft owned what they call the Biscayne model under the corporation in Traverse City. It's the same hull, and it never did change, except for a little bit in the transom area from the Boca Raton company to Lake and Sea, Traverse City. So this is an area that will get heavy duty attention. On the inside of this boat, at this level, somebody fiberglassed it. So that leads me to think this could be one of the early Lake and Seas that had leaking issues, and that was a remedy, was to fiberglass the inside of the seam, but they left the rest of it this far up. They left it alone. So every boat is an archaeological project. You should look at it with that attitude and learn from it, and I do every day. So I'm going to work on getting the rest of this rail off and then work on the staples. It's important to hold on to this transom protector made out of aluminum. And yeah, it might be time to replace it, but makes for a good pattern. And I don't want to get rid of anything until it's been replaced or fixed. So hold on to that. And that will be the last joint fastener. The deck is right here and it sits on top of the hull joint right here and kind of caps it. And you can see that this is a weak spot for water. And when the screws came out, all of them have earth on them or rotten wood. So anything I took out of the transom is already pretty indicative that there's a problem. I planned on replacing this transom with Kusa. I'm not going to put any wood back on this boat. We have great alternatives like Kusa, which is technically fiberglass and resin plywood. Why not just use that? And it's better, it's stronger, and won't rot. So next thing is to work my way around the joint and get the staples out, and then we'll try to get the adhesive to break loose. So what I'm doing is running just a putty knife down through this, and the staples are so bad, corroded, that even though I thought they probably were aluminum or stainless when they were put in, I'm able to break them pretty easily with this. Saves you from pulling them out individually, and be almost impossible to do anyways. So this seal is popping pretty well. The reason it got tight down there is because it's been fiberglass from the inside. So two things I'm going to do there: get this all broken loose from the staples and caulk, and then I can run a oscillating tool, thin blade through there and cut that glass. Obviously, I could go inside and do it, but that would be very hard. But it's an option. I'm going to try the reciprocating oscillating saw first and tool, and then I'll go ahead from there. Now that I've got the joint broke everywhere, but we're behind down at this level where the water came in on multiple models, I've got a fiberglass and resin patch on the inside that's sealing the seam, keeping it from coming apart. So I'm going to use an oscillating tool. Just going to go ahead and use the wide. I want as much surface as I can, and it won't wander if you have a wider one. But I'm going to do it very carefully, knowing I'm just trying to get through. It looks like one layer of roving or maybe cloth. So it won't take long. It's just going to be loud, messy, and well, this is what it looks like when it's apart. The this had something going on after it came out of the factory. Tremendous amount of mastic. If I had to guess, 5,200 from the era. And then it was fiberglassed, like on the side, also the transom. And maybe when they did this, they cut holes here in the engine well for some odd reason. It might have been a different size motor, so the engine pulley didn't work, so they created a new one. So I got that apart last. Just by lifting it on an angle, it broke it loose. This glass was not put in very well, so it was very dry. Just kind of tore apart. So what I'll do now, I've got a cable here to cut, and then the boat will be free, and then I'll make a a dolly, kind of like a cradle for the hull. I'll make a cradle for the deck. And what happens is that it'll have like 4 to 6 sticks, if you want to call them, vertical uprights that'll be connected. And I can only build it once the hull is off, or the deck is off the hull, because I don't know where to put my 2x4s, for great support. What that'll allow me to do is get under there with a chair, and I can work on the hardware, but it also will allow me to work on the deck at a comfortable height, waist height. And kind of the way it was built is how I'm going to go at it. The hull will leave the shop until I'm ready for it, and then what I could do is take this all the way up to the cradle and leave it up above with some brakes so that it didn't fall on my head. And then I could work on the hull as well under here, not taking up as much space. But with summer, I can move them in and out of the shop. And it is fiberglass, there's no wood, so it won't hurt it until we get to the paint stage. So there'll be 2 different dollies set up. One will be outside or on the trailer, and one will be in. So I am going to snip this cable, and I took a bunch of photos so I understand how the cables are connected, but also just because it's weird inside, I'm going to show you. From the hull, bow forward, you'll notice this big mass. That is flotation foam, and when they took it out of the mold, it was upside down. They attached the flotation mold with glass. This is just up in here, and then they spray. Usually, it's spray painted. On the back side, it is. So they painted it if you could see it from the cockpit. Other than that, that's foam that they made in a big cube. Probably had a mold, expanding foam. And then you can see the inner workings of, here's where somebody put all their electronics in here, and I don't know why they would do it there. Very hard to get to. I'm not sure why. But you can see the reverse of the deck is now to be seen. And there's more foam up under the fins. Each fin has a foam pack as well that's been glassed in. And that's very normal. I noticed that on the Saratoga that I took apart. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and take this up and move the hull outside of my shop, and I will proceed to make the dolly that will be sitting on for a few months while I take all the hardware and stuff off and begin the sanding and repair.